It's time for today's episode of the UGA Sports Live Podcast, recorded in front of a slightly tipsy studio audience at world-famous Champy's Fried Chicken. We will have the latest on Georgia Bulldogs football, basketball, and recruiting. Watch live and send us your questions on the 11 Alive Sports page on Facebook. Be advised this podcast is off the record and not safe for work. Also, be sure to subscribe to the UGA Sports Live Podcast on iTunes and Google Play.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the UGA Sports Live Podcast here at Champy's on Baxter Street. My name is Rodney DeBulsey. I will be your host. We are joined by a special guest this week, Brent Rollins of Pro Football Focus. Not the Brent Rollins who grew up next door to me. Speaking of, if anybody knows where Brian Rollins is, give me a shout out. I haven't seen that guy. He's one of my best friends. His birthday's 2 days after mine. I haven't seen him in 20 years. So if anybody knows where Brian Rollins is, or Brian Page, give him a shout out. And, of course, we have Jim Donnan, the featured – we actually put your name in the show title now. I now call it the UGA Sports Live Podcast with Jim Donnan.
That's it for this episode of the UGA Sports Live Podcast. Tune in next week for more Georgia Bulldogs news and notes from Athens.
There's a reason he's in the Hall of Fame, and we're in Champy's. So that's but Coach Donnan is so gracious to come and do the show with us. And we brought Brent Rollins on because Rivals has a partnership with Pro Football Focus where we use their grading system. Now, we used to do grades at UGAsports.com, and we would grade by position groups, how the wide receivers do, how the defensive backs do. And it's opinion-based, and sometimes we were right, sometimes we were wrong. But what you guys do is grade every player. And this is fascinating because we also get the participation reports. So we know how many plays a guy was in, whether they were run plays, whether they were pass plays, how they do. Do they do well? Do they do poorly? And I think that on today's show, we need to talk about how you guys come up with that because to me it's interesting. And, we'll talk about some of the guys that graded well this past year, maybe some of the guys that didn't, some of the guys who are going into the NFL and how they did. So we're going to get to Brent real quick. But first, I'm going to give a big shout-out to Athens Ford for being one of our big sponsors, Aaron Overhead Doors for being our biggest sponsor, Your Pie, March 14th. It's coming up, folks. We're at the end of at the end of February, March 14th, Pie Day, 3.14. You can go to any Your Pie and get a pizza that's normally like $8 for $3.14. Can't beat that. Of course, Cable East for being a big sponsor of our show, and Academia Brewing Company. I went out there for my belated birthday dinner the other night. I'll tell you more about that when we get to that part of the show. Fantastic dinner, and we got some of their new crowlers here. You can actually go by Academia and buy their beer. You don't have to just get it at the location. We have their Hopperdesiac and their Hunker Down Brown. You got to try those. But anyway, I want to jump right into the Pro Football Focus part of it. Now, you go way back. You and Coach Donnan go way back because you used to watch him as a kid.
Yes, very much so. I'm originally from Point Pleasant, West Virginia, which is 45 minutes north of Huntington, West Virginia. So as I was talking to Coach before we started here, outside of the Georgia fan who went to both home and away games while he was coach, I've probably seen more games he's coached in person than any Georgia fan. And
so we
went to all the playoff games. I mean, some of the great players that were there. We were talking about Michael Payton before, who would have been fantastic in today's football. Troy Brown, Mike Bartram, Pennington, Chris Parker, young man that I watched a lot, throw a lot of balls to Troy Brown. Todd Donnan was a great quarterback. Succession, Michael Payton to Todd Donnan to Chad Pennington, just an absolute great trio of quarterbacks at Marshall. Troy Brown was a great player. Chris Parker was phenomenal as a running back. I remember he had the back flap. Then he always had the back flap that running backs have.
Gotcha.
And fascinating stuff. Loved it.
So, he's the only other guy beside Zion Williamson that I ever saw come out of his shoe. He actually split a shoe against Montana in the national championship game, making the cut on 48 slant. But we're glad to have you with us today. And, I know our fans enjoy watching our show and getting different perspectives, but they also look forward to your grading system every week. And just tell us how the whole thing's set up as far as the University of Georgia and how many people are involved in the actual process of getting the grades out for each team. I know you say you do a lot of different teams around the country, but just say like Georgia's playing Texas A&M, so take us through what happens as far as the grading situation.
Well, the biggest thing is now for us, we do every player, every game. So it's every college football game, FBS, FCS, It's all the NFL games, and for each individual game, there's probably, I don't know the exact number, but I think it's in the neighborhood of 6 to 7 different processes that are a part of each individual game. Think about any sort of, you have offensive line group. There's someone who's specifically looking at the offensive line. There's someone who's specifically looking at quarterback play, receivers. But in terms of the grading, each play is looked at. Every player on every play is given a grade if necessary, because there's, and I'll say a lot of players, it's a 0 grade on certain plays where, hey, it's the backside tackle on a power right play type thing. Those sort of pieces that are, it's not like everybody's plus minus every single play. But there's people who, one, categorize for us just basic box score type things. Where was, what's the down and distance? What's, where's the ball placed at? Who ran the ball in the play? Was it a pass play? Was it a run play? Those sort of basic box score type things. Then there's individuals like myself for the college games that chart every player on every play, and it's where'd you line up, what'd you do, was there press coverage or not, was there a blitz, how many rushers, did a defensive lineman drop into coverage, all those sort of pieces on every play. And then there's individuals who are actually doing that sort of analysis piece. And like I was telling Roddy this past year, the person that actually did most of the analysis for Georgia's games just got hired by the Rams as the assistant QB coach.
Zach Robinson?
Yes, sir.
You know I knew that.
Yeah. How did you know that?
Zach's coach knows everything.
No, I know, but I did read that Zach Robinson. I thought it was kind of interesting that he would get that job coming out, on playing quarterback last year, like 2010 or 11, and then he's going right. But the one thing that you see about McVay, he's really wired into a lot of guys around the country, and he knows a lot of people, and I think that's good. You bring in a young guy and train him in your system. He just put Zach Taylor out to be the head coach of the Bengals. But go ahead, I don't want to take away from him. But I think it's good that our fans understand the intricacies and the detail that goes involved. It's just not some fly-by-night deal.
Yeah, because
no, sir.
That's the thing is when we put out a grade, we say, okay, this kid was, he graded out at 76%. A lot of people don't understand what that means, but they're like, according to who?
Yes.
And I got to admit, that was my first reaction. I'm like, who the hell are you guys?
Well, I'd question you too on it. But I think the one thing you pointed out that I would interject here is, and we used to do it like that, we don't want to give a guy that's on the backside of a play that really doesn't have anything to do with the play a big plus on the play and help his grade, because it's really – he didn't have anything to do with the play, so we would usually just give him a U on it, a check, a minus, or a U, so you don't take those U's and divide it into, you take the number of plays and divide it into the number of pluses and get your percentage, I'm sure. But the other time, certain plays you might give him a double check, for having just an unbelievable play or something like that. But I think, by and large, my assessment of what you guys do has been very. I was a little bit leery of it at first, but it's very.
We all were.
It's very.
Hey, there are still NFL players that are leery of it.
But it's very
agents. I bet
football.
Agents love it. Actually,
it's very football related from the standpoint of. Bottom line for a coach is even though you might not have done the exact grade that you need to have, but did it get the job done? Sometimes perfect technique it gets a check, but and bad technique gets a minus, but you still were able to achieve the
right.
what you needed to on the play. So there's a lot of in between there on the grading, but I thought it was pretty off there. You were talking about the fact that you guys even really get hard into special teams as far as and then Roddy's going to the and that's something that you probably don't get when you're doing your deal there. You get food while you're doing this show here, but anyhow,
we'll take it.
I think Roddy's going Thursday to the Combine, and one of the things we've really been stressing for our guys that are going to be at the Combine is their ability to play special teams and be called on to play in significant roles is going to help them in the draft, don't you think?
Very much so. Very much so. And that's one of the things you've seen with Kirby been here the past 2-3 years is you see guys, and that's obviously the Saban philosophy is starters who big-time players are now, guys on your kickoff team just as much as anyone else.
Well, just watch a punt, and all of a sudden you see Sony Michel lined up back there, Nick Chubb back there, and you're punting away. You're like, why is he on the field? Then all of a sudden Sony gets a tackle, and you're like, well, that makes sense, so the guys can do it. But I also like the fact that you guys not only work on, each individual person, but it helps us when we can say this offensive tackle is great in pass protection, but not in run blocking. See, we never got into that sort of detail. Or how many times did Georgia line up, in which formations is big. We've been able to do that. So my point is there's the amount of information that's there is mind-boggling. And I think Patrick Garvin described it as a lost afternoon. Because the first time he logged in, he went down so many rabbit holes of formations and grades and stuff like that. He was just fascinated by it. I think we lost him for it may have been more than a couple days before he came back out of there. But being able to get in and check out, I remember at the beginning of the season, I think it was Andrew Thomas had one bad game when it came to run blocking, but his pass blocking was lights out. Then you saw the next game where George was just running the ball, running off his side. You're like, and sure enough, his grade went up, because all of a sudden, and I could be wrong. Sorry, Andrew, if I was wrong. But point being, it was the seeing real-time adjustments and seeing guys get better. Or sometimes we'd be asked, hey, why isn't this guy playing more? And we go back and look at his grade. Well, he's not. His pass blocking is terrible, and all of a sudden, not terrible, but not as good as the guy who's supplanted him, be it a wide receiver, be it whatever. So my point being, you can get a subscription to this.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So you don't just have to rely on UGASports.com, although you should.
Well, for college you
27 do. For college you do.
Yes.
But if you're a fantasy player or if you're just a huge fan, you can go in and get all this PFF stuff for your teams. So, but who are your clients? This is the
wealth of information.
To me, the most important thing is, you don't have to name them, but any group of fans could get together and say they're doing this, and have some guys who get hired away. But to me, the end all be all is who else pays you for this?
Well, the interesting thing about that is the growth. Is when I started. So I think this upcoming season will be my 5th season with PFF.
Right.
And when I started, I think we had maybe half of the NFL teams and a few college teams. Now it's all 32 NFL teams, so I can kind of name drop there in a way because it's all 32.
Yeah.
And
so everybody's paying you for this information.
And then now 50. I think the most recent number is 50 college teams that we have as clients.
So I want to interject one question here real quick. When you got do you think Bill Belichick wants to see this more about what his team's doing or the other teams?
How coaches have used it varies from team to team, but I think the biggest thing that you see is a job of a graduate assistant. What used to maybe take them 10 hours now takes them 30 minutes. In terms of the ability to break things down and run a report that, hey, let's look at all of LSU's 11 personnel in 3rd and 7 or greater. Let's look at all of, for example, one of the things they cite on this.
When you say 11 personnel for our fans, tell them how many people on the field for the
1 tight end, 1 running back, 3 receivers. Yes, sir.
So I think the big thing there to me would be, from a coaching perspective, is when you scout people, and you're going to have tendencies, you're going to have all that, but the personnel issue is the big deal. It's just like a basketball game. What kind of matchup you're going to get? Same thing. You're trying to create. You see all these substitution patterns now. You're trying to create a matchup that gives you an advantage, and I think these grades will show you with real quickly without having to really delve into it and watch it down. This guy's really good at playing press coverage, but he's terrible when he bails. Or this guy's really good when he's playing, against a tight technique, blocking a 4-eye tackle, but he can't reach a 5 technique or something like that. So
it's, and what you said and what Roddy said a little bit earlier is when you're looking specifically in a game, and we as fans, you say, hey, this sack here, that sack there, one big play, one moment. But we've watched all 65 plays that you played, and maybe they had one big moment, but lots and lots of inconsistencies in the other part. And to Coach's point, he's 100% right.
Well, that comes out because we've posted your grades on the site, and someone would say, hey, this guy had 2 interceptions and you grade him as a 55? What the hell? But they don't realize that there was also like 7 missed tackles,
Yes.
So there's there's more to it. And, we would see a running back or a wide receiver do well and their grade didn't make sense. People get mad. Or, quarterback, you say, he was 19 of 22 and you graded him as a 65. Now, granted, those passes were –
That was probably South Carolina.
The other 3 were interceptions. Huh? No.
Or no, it's those little dump. So explain that. So because we've had situations where you think a quarterback or somebody has a great game, but they don't grade out well, and it's not. I mean, trust me, I give you all the credibility in the world, but amongst the average fan, you're like, they didn't watch the same game I was watching. So explain why somebody would appear to have a good game, but really not.
Right, and a lot of that is box score stats versus what they actually did.
Because that's what people throw up. They throw up the box score.
It's performance versus actual production. And, for example, in the play I think we talked about at one point in time, the South Carolina game. Mm-hmm. Jake throws a nice, smooth, quick, easy swing pass to McCole. Houses it. And he just shows that, hey, I'm faster than everybody on the field. The result, their performance there is, hey, it's an expected play from the quarterback position. It's not like he's putting it 40 yards down the field into tight coverage on the outside shoulder type play, and you're grading that based on that versus
you're grading a 5-yard pass, not a 70-yard touchdown.
Exactly, and box score stats don't always mesh with actual performance. I remember a couple years back, Aaron Rodgers had a game I think it was on Monday Night Football that he had like 5 touchdown passes and close to 400 yards or something like that.
Yes.
But his grade wasn't necessarily reflected in that, and a lot of it was because guys, Randall Cobb's taking one of the house, Devontae Adams is taking one of the house. It's independent of the actual quarterback play. So each position and each play is looked at specifically into what the task is.
Well, that makes a lot of sense.
But essentially, you're not going to fire Rodgers or Brady anytime soon, right?
No, sir. Definitely not. Those guys are pretty good.
Mission accomplished, really, with what they do. And I think there's a lot to be said about just assuming – let's just say take the quarterback-center exchange. So, when the quarterback's under center and he takes the snap, we don't give him a plus or anything like that. But if he fumbles the snap, he's going to get a double minus.
Yes, sir.
So he's going to have 50 plays where he doesn't even get any credit for getting a snap, but he fumbles one, he's going to get a lot of blame because it's routine. It's part of your job.
Yes, it's the expected play.
But it's what you, like you were talking about, you're supposed to do that, but I think it gets back to, again, from my standpoint, as far as grading players, we didn't put a lot of emphasis on the pure grade as much as we did of exactly what the effort was,
right.
what the technique was missed assignments. If you got a team that's making a lot of missed assignments like we did against LSU, you're going to lose the game.
Yes, sir.
That's how that had as much to do with us losing the game as anything, don't you think?
Yeah, when you got Tyson Campbell pointing here and then this guy pointing here.
Reed didn't cover him.
Yeah. What? Who was supposed to do that? Yeah, those things are come out quite quickly.
So when do we get the coaches' grades?
That's a very interesting question.
Contract, man.
That's good. Yeah.
Hey, those guys keep getting good contracts. They're grading out dang good. The ones that are getting
I always loved. You're right, Coach. Because I always thought it was funny when we would do our position grades. We would get people who would just livid that we wouldn't do the coaches because if they thought, you remember a while back, Jim Chaney did not run the ball enough, and Sony Michel and Nick Chubb had to sit down with him. Apparently, there was this meeting that everybody talked about. Now, then all of a sudden, Jim Chaney runs the ball too damn much. The fan base, and it's not just Georgia. Trust me, it's everywhere.
I'm saying if you're not averaging 45 and undefeated, then you're not doing your job.
Right. So everyone's bad. But people would just get livid that we weren't grading the coaches. And I'm like, what do you want us to grade them on? What's the criteria? The play call that we don't know,
right?
The personnel selected that we don't know if somebody's injured or something like that. I'm like, if you want to give me the criteria to grade the coaches, we'll grade the coaches. But until then, we're not doing it.
There's certain. I mean, it's interesting that you bring that. There's certain situations like the math comes into play a lot of times. Hey, in terms of time, how much time you have left, timeouts. Those.
But even then, I always say this about people that get mad that Georgia or anybody runs the ball on 3rd and 11. Why'd you run it? Well, everyone's expecting a pass. They dropped 8 into coverage, Maybe that draw play is going to work for you.
Possibly.
But people get mad at it when it doesn't work. Then when it does, they're like, oh, that was genius. But wait a minute. If it hadn't worked, you'd have been screaming for the coach's head. So,
but get back to the Missouri game. Everybody's busting us about, how we get hurt.
It excites me that coach is talking about Missouri.
Hurt on the run game. And basically, we shut the passing game down. That was their strength, right? So we really had a good game plan against it. The only thing we just folded a little bit in the middle there in the red zone, and they ran the ball. But that's a great example of having a good game plan, didn't you think?
I was double fist pump when you brought that up the last week, because usually at work, if I get a chance, during the day job, I am able to listen to that in the background while doing other things. And the week after,
okay, you can say you stopped working. They're not watching. Your bosses aren't.
Never
watching.
stop
You
working.
don't know that.
Never stop working. But
it's not a self-disclosure show, man. This is not open up your veins and tell the truth.
But after the Missouri game, talking about the passing game, I was just 100% factual, because, and here's the thing, one of the things that all of the data that we have, I mean, mountains upon mountains of data.
It's ridiculous amount of stuff.
That we can go from descriptive, where it's, hey, this is what happened, to then also predictive. And there's so many things that we're doing now also from a mathematical standpoint, statistics.
Which is why people are subscribing to you.
Yes, and there's a gambling angle there, that's for darn sure.
Well, no, the predictive stuff for the coaches are like, we want to see what they've done, and now how will this work?
It's what's valuable. And in terms of how valuable the passing game. Now, in the NFL, it's magnified even more so than the college game. But the value and how points come from the passing game are way more so than the running game. And when Coach talked about that, I was sitting, when watching the Missouri game and going through that game, that was my 100% same sort. I was thinking the same exact thing. But they know that the only way this team is going to beat them is through the air. And it was fun to watch. It's great you pointed that out, by the way. I knew you knew
and
that.
honestly,
once in a while we find something. But I think it's just the whole point of this, going over this for our fans, there's a lot of different ways to analyze and to do everything, and you can get like mountains of data, but what are you going to do with what they give you, and how are you going to apply it to your team, and how is it going to make your team better? And as you can see by the number of people that are continue to increase their usage of you, people see the value in it. And hey, I remember in 1971, a guy and I was coaching NC State, which is a good school and has a very good, a lot of different engineers and everything. A guy from the engineering school over there came over to our office and wanted to see our defensive coach, and their coach said, "What do you want to see me about?" He said, "Well, I think I can set up a program where you can have computer programming of the other team's film and give you the stuff that it takes y'all on the board and cut it in half." We were the first team that I ever knew of that, and probably some other teams had, but we had IBM working out there at the Research Triangle, giving us computer stats right there.
Before PFF existed.
Right. It was unbelievable, and it worked too. I mean, it was good. I mean, our Coach Michaels, he used to work my butt off. I was a freshman coach. When I used to go on the road recruiting, he used to give me cans of film that I had to break the film down while I was going out there recruiting kids and break down the film at night when I went back to the hotel, just so we'd have it on Sunday. And when that guy said that, I said, "Hey, can I take you out to lunch?"
Well, and like I said, you can get into down and distance, all the different formations and how they do. What I liked is something that Trent Smallwood, he took your information, and this year before each game, we basically do the starting 11 for Georgia, starting 11 for Tennessee, Florida, whoever.
It's a good way of looking at it.
We put their grades in there. And all of a sudden you see Andrew Thomas is grading out at like 82%, and the defensive end for whatever school, this guy's at like 65% on rush plays. Well, doesn't take a genius to know, hey, let's run. And again, you're going to run off Andrew Thomas's hip anyway, but the point being is like now we kind of know what's going to happen. And sure enough, you see some of the – and he'd highlight the bigger mismatches.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, all of a sudden we would see in the following Saturday, hey, it's 3rd and 4. I bet they run off the right side off the left side behind Andrew Thomas. And sure enough, no fullback, off Andrew's inside hip, and he's got that defensive end pushed to the outside.
Yep. It's good.
Pick up a 6, and you're like, well, hell, that makes it easy. So you got to think that these offensive coordinators are loving what you're doing, and the defensive coordinators know what their problems are, their issues are, and all of a sudden,
very much
right after that linebacker is backing up that defensive end, saying, hey, because we know it's coming.
And that's, I think, from a coaching perspective, that's the greatest value of what we bring is being able to identify those things and a lot of times it's even self-scouting. It's not necessarily, hey, I have an opponent coming up. It's, hey, I have a bye this week. I need a self-scout. Like, for example, if I'm an offensive coordinator and, as you're in game planning and you certain plays, hey, this starts coming up more often because you like it or you've had success with it. Now you can go back, hey, do a self-scout. We can run a report, so all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And look, in this situation, you're 80% here doing this one thing, or you're from this formation, you're 90% run. Like, for example, if you're 2 tight ends and Jason Stanley and Tyler Simmons in the game, you're 95% run.
Yeah, let's just say I didn't focus on the wide receivers with my camera on those plays.
So, those are sort of things that we now quantify.
He said, when you bring in a new coach, sometimes you have that new coach say, what did you guys see on film about us? Break us down, scout us, So that happens all the time. I'm going to move away from that commercial. That's been a good PFF infomercial. Go ahead and subscribe, or subscribe to UGA Sports, and you get all the stuff too. I want to give a big shout out to Athens Forward for sponsoring our show. And I was reached out to them. I said, hey, what do you guys want me to talk about at Athens Forward? Because I know you have all these special deals. And they said, we got one deal that is just a big mind-boggling deal. You got to get on it. I said, well, what is it? They now have 0% financing for 72 months on the 2018 F-150s. Best-selling truck in America, the XLT 302A crew cabs. 4 qualified buyers. They said, please be sure to say 4 qualified. But you can't just come out there and go, if you got that 376 credit score, you're not going to get the 0% financing for 72 months. But again, 72 months. And for those of you who are bad at math, that's 6 years. 6 years, right?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to be sure. 6 years. I didn't have to take a math. At 72 months, 0% financing for the Ford F-150. Now, this is the Raptor. The Raptor is a little bit better and a little bit higher end than just your regular Ford F-150. But if you get a chance, go out there and test drive one of those Raptors. Holy cow, those things are phenomenal. But if you get a chance, swing out there. And remember, all their new or pre-owned vehicles all come with a lifetime powertrain warranty. So now you can get a brand new one, 6 years, 0% financing for qualified buyers. You got to do it. The Ford F-150, phenomenal. I do want to jump into, we had a question, Coach, this is for you. What are your thoughts on moving the Auburn game? We found out last week that Georgia and Auburn are moving Auburn to earlier in the season, starting in the 2020 season. So it won't be that last SEC game that Georgia faces, and Auburn won't have to take on Georgia and Alabama on the road every other year to end their season.
Is that just for that year, though, at this point? It's not been ascertained after that yet, has it?
I didn't even check into that.
I think that has to be in the realm of things. It might just be a one-year deal. Who knows? But I think certainly Kirby had to look at it, and I haven't spoken with him about it. But, if I just look at the trending of the teams that we're going to play, the one thing you always know about playing a team like Auburn, very physical game. If you look at our roster, the way we've had injuries occur after the Auburn game that really have something to do with the rest of the year, you got to look at that. But you also look at you want to win the East, and to me, the team that's really trending, you can say what you want to about Florida, but when you look at the acquisition of talent, you look at the acquisition of coaching, you look at the blueprint that guy's had being a coach at Alabama, I just think that Tennessee's trending up where maybe playing them a little later in the year, particularly in 20 where our team is not going to be quite as experienced. We're going to have new linemen there. We lose Thomas, all that. So I don't know. I don't know what the bottom line why we did it, but you like your tradition of playing late. But at the same time, that year might be helpful to play Tennessee because I think Tennessee probably be better at the end of the year than Auburn will.
Yeah, I don't like it, and the reason
you don't is you like to go to Dollywood.
That's true.
I mean, you like to go to Dollywood. Tell us.
No,
you're a traditionalist, man. You're a traditionalist.
If we're going to have anything, we're going to move that Kentucky game earlier in the year so that every other year I can go up to the racetrack.
Right.
And when you
it's all based on food, travel, gambling.
Well,
quality of life.
That is college football. Come on. Oh, and making fun of coaches.
I think there's nothing you can do about it, really.
No, you're right. When I talked to some of the people at Auburn, and a lot of the Georgia fans said, "Well, what are we getting out of this? You're doing a favor for Auburn, but what's the pickup for Georgia?" And I was kind of stumped. I'm like, I don't know, but I mean, I don't.
It's what I just said.
Well, I'm just saying.
You're not going to play a team that. I mean, to me, Tennessee's trending upward. You're going to be playing them for the championship later in the year when you're a more experienced team.
Yeah, but they're more experienced too.
So what?
I'm just saying I don't know that that's the big win. To me, you had a chance to right a wrong, if you will. Georgia had to play at Auburn twice. Auburn was willing, according to the people I talked to playing at Georgia 2 times in a row so that they wouldn't have Alabama and Georgia both as away games or both as home games. Flipping that around would also have a situation where you weren't playing Tech, Auburn, and Tennessee home or away each other year for Georgia. I also want them to fix, and I do like the idea of moving Tennessee away from the Vanderbilt game because I hate that every other year you have back-to-back trips to Tennessee. You host them both, and then you're up to Knoxville and then to Nashville or Nashville, Knoxville, back-to-back weeks. It's like the Tennessee duo should be split. One should be at home, one should be away every year. And I'm like, let Auburn come to UGA twice in a row.
Not going to happen.
Georgia, well, they were willing to.
How do you know that?
Talking to people at Auburn.
All right.
I'm just saying, but the thing is, the schedule's already set through 2023. So.
Coach is skeptical a little bit.
No,
we need to know, though, is it Dave, is that after 20, is it just a 1-year deal? Auburn. Are you listening to the show or eating, man? What are you doing? And we're talking about the Auburn game in 2020. Is that going to be the only year? Is it going to be from then on?
From then
every
on.
year.
Well, until 2023 when they reset the schedule.
All right. So what do you think about it? Because I know that you're not involved. You got to do the grades and all that. What's your take on it?
It's a lot of conversation for something that you literally have no idea what it's going to be like.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, there's so many. It's one of the great things about football. There's so many factors that are outside of our control. Like, hey, injuries, weather. Who knows what can happen when you play that game? It might be.
But I'm not going to get to go to Dollywood. It's going to be late in the year.
But it's not going to get to go to Dollywood and enjoy that experience as much. That hurts. That's real. That's tangible.
No, do you know what you got if you've got Bill Clinton, Dolly Parton, and Al Gore in the same room? 2 boobs and a country singer. All right, let's go. Here we go.
Yeah, just to roll with that.
I wanted to ask you about the upcoming draft here.
Yeah, we do have some draft questions.
Because you see this kid, and the reason I do that, we're making these comparisons about grades on Thomas. How do you rate that kid from Kentucky on the grades? Do you think he's a top 10 draft pick like everybody's projecting him based on the way he played at Kentucky, that defensive end?
Yes, sir. He's one of the top, I think, in our recent – I have the recent pre-combine top 50 that's on the website right now. He's 5th in terms of an overall rating. And the interesting thing about that, by the way, is I remember right after the UGA game, if you look at Josh Allen's numbers in terms of numbers of quarterback pressures and how his grade and how effective he was for the past 2 seasons, it was astronomical. Except against Georgia. He was 0 for 2 years against UGA. And that's, it's an interesting
We game playing the heck out of him. I thought we used our 12 personnel, a lot of 2 tights where he didn't have an edge rush and did a good job. But the one thing that I think bringing you here with Roddy going there, Roddy basically just going over there to get a shrimp cocktail on Thursday night.
St. Elmo's.
And a lot of horseradish with it. But I think –
and tamales. Don't forget the tamales.
I think the point that we'd like to know is some of these guys that are not going to the combine, what do you think about Jason Stanley, about the inside backer, I can't think of his name. The kid had a little trouble, came back this year.
Patrick.
Yeah, Natrez Patrick. What's are they going to be free agents, or they got a shot at getting drafted?
I think Stanley's interesting because he could obviously run a 40 time that puts him on a little more people's radar. I think Natrez is going to be a free agent. I don't see him from a draft
change
standpoint.
Direction, all that. But
yeah,
but the pure speed factor is going to be so prevalent for him, and for the fact that I think, from my standpoint, that he has been good on special teams, and that's something that Kirby would always bring out about how good Jason Stanley covered kicks and dropped things, like protected the ball inside the 10 and things like that. But so what about the guys that came out this year, the 4 guys that are going to go to the combine that could have come back? How do you got to – I mean, is that a good question for me to ask?
No, that's a great question. That's actually was going to be my first question of the show after we established the bona fides is did these guys – based on their grades.
We're on NFL Live right now, and you're Todd McShay. So I used to know Todd McShay when he had holes in his shoes. I'm telling you, he used to work over there in the bottom bowels of ESPN and just look at tape. And then he, that's all he did. He never did make the air. And then he kind of got a little bit better, and then he got better. And then Mel Kiper realized he knew something. Now he's the voice of reason up there.
I actually thought you were going to compare me to Mel.
No, Mel.
I have great locks like Mel.
Yeah, Mel. Well, that's why Roddy brought you the first guy who had more hair than him.
Yes, I'm not last.
So tell us about those 4 guys, and do you think it was a good move? Do you think they're going to all go in the first 3 rounds?
I think not all. I think personally, just my own personal opinion, I think Nada, Ridley, and the interesting Elijah Holyfield might get into the 3rd round. It just depends on, is there a running back run type thing. I think McColl's going to have a hard time finding himself in the top 3 rounds just because his speed is obviously going to be is what it is. It's change the game speed.
He's going to have to knock it out at the combine or the pro day, and if he does, he's going to jump up there just like Conley. But how about the other guys, with Baker and Walker? What do you think about them?
Baker's 7th on our initial pre-combine top 50, and he was one of the sort of 1 and 2 top 5 all season long in our grades. He had, one of the numbers we track is forced incompletions, i.e. how much is the cornerback actually forcing completion via deflection, via something in coverage, and he was, I think, 10th in the country in terms of forced incompletion percentage if somebody have at least 25 targets, which, by the way, Eric Stokes was number 1 on that number.
Well, if only we had known Eric Stokes was going to be good.
He was really good when he played. That's for sure.
Hey, but Baker's – I'm
giving you credit for nailing that early.
I'm going to say this about Baker and watching him practice and his physicality, everything. I worry about – that he might be a little bit too aggressive in a lot of situations up there because these guys are so talented at getting off the line, and he can't jam a guy after 5 yards. He's going to have improve his technique from that standpoint. I talked to Kirby and Mel about that a little bit too, in that transition. He certainly got all the ball skills and all that, but he's going to have to be careful because he had a lot of opportunities in those deflections that he could have been called for interference.
Right.
And
very much
don't you think he was on the bubble on
very
that?
Very much on the fence.
That's going to be – but I'd certainly take him over a lot of guys with that in mind. I'd a whole lot rather be more aggressive than not. But I guarantee you it's a different coverage up in the pros with the 5-yard rule, up there. After 5 yards, you can't touch those guys, and then you got to be able to redirect your feet and do all that other stuff.
Can't breathe on them.
So what about Walker?
He graded out well, yeah. But I was going to say, what about DeAndre Walker? Because to me,
we're trying to couple everything we can in the show, man.
I'm just saying, DeAndre
on the time frame.
He's seems to me either very high or mercurial.
In terms of the draft part of it, I think you see him as a later round guy because there is ability there. He was the top pass rusher on this team on a per snap basis.
Right.
Even last season, he was on a per snap basis, had as many quarterback pressures in half the pass rush snaps as Davin Bellamy and Lorenzo Carter.
Right.
So, on a per snap basis, he gets to the quarterback, and there's great value in getting to the quarterback on a consistent basis. But it'll be interesting to see where he falls. I think he's definitely a mid-round type guy who, again, the combine and the pro day, especially the pro day, will be vitally important for a lot of these guys.
Maybe we could get the NFL coaches to come over to Champies that day, and then maybe just spread the word, get them over here, and just have some good old chicken. What day is that?
It's March 14th? Something.
March 14th. When is the pro day?
I think that sounds right. I think it's a Wednesday.
I know we got.
I was looking at it on the schedule.
Spring break coming up that a week. I saw we got Lane Kiffin coming in here to speak at our clinic along with
Doug Peterson.
Doug Peterson and Williams from the Jets.
Yeah, I need to be sure I get into that coach's clinic because that's going to be right.
Well, last year I had McVay and Belichick.
Get me on with I actually need to call the guys at Athens Christian School and volunteer to be a defensive backs coach or something. Just volunteer coach here.
You could go in there. I mean, you got all the makeup. I mean, if somebody, if you would walk in the room, they'd say, "That's a defensive back coach." There's no question.
That fat guy, he's the offensive line coach.
Yeah,
I wear the short shorts. I get in with a whistle.
He looks like it.
All good.
Hey, we had a guy come. You talking about Point Pleasant? We had a guy come from over there in a place up in West Virginia that's a real small school. And you know how you have the practices, Roddy, where you blow the horn and you change periods and all? And I told these guys, I said, it's my first clinic. I said, hey, any of you guys want any questions? Just walk around on the field, do everything we're trying to make. So, it's going pretty good practice and everything. This guy comes over to me about halfway through. He says, Coach, what are those horns for?
No way.
I said, well, basically he tells us to change from one period to the other. He said, oh, really? And he said, so when that guy says sky, what does that mean? I said, well, that means safety support. And what is cloud? I said, that means corner. He said, wow, that's pretty good. I said, holy smoke, man, what's your record? And then they called me from over there at the union and said, Coach, we're going to be closing up the chow line here in about 15 minutes. I said, come on, man. We got 200-some guys coming here to eat tonight and everything. And so we had to call off our first practice so these guys could go eat. They wouldn't keep it open for us.
Wow.
I knew I had to do a little bit of work in there. I wasn't Barry Switzer there at Marshall, that's for sure.
I do. You look at the coaches. Kirby Smart has come in for that coaching clinic. And, I mean, the 2 Super Bowl coaches last year, those guys coming back, I think it's big. But as much as there's things about Lane Kiffin that are irritating, I would like to pick his brain and some of those offensive meetings that they have. That's a guy who, just like Todd McVay, you just kind of want to. I just want to hear what you have to say, And I think that a lot of those coaches' clinics, I've seen some of the guests invited. You're like, but Georgia's are lights out.
And sometimes the talk is big picture. It's culture building. It's how do we, what is different about what we do versus maybe somebody else does, versus nuts and bolts that happen maybe not necessarily in a presentation type format.
It's great.
Yeah, but I like a snarky guy, so I'll Lane Kiffin.
Well, Kirby does a really good job, though, and you're around here, and he does a really good job of making these high school coaches feel at home, not only for the clinic, but, I mean, that open door policy, these guys come over to practice.
Yes.
A lot like he does with the press, That's a burr in his saddle there, man. Oh, yeah. He says public institution.
Public university with zero access to the game. Yeah.
Media and healthcare.
I do want to mention a charity. And this is, I apologize, I should have mentioned this weeks in the past. I want anybody, if you're watching the show, and I'm asking this as a personal favor because this hits home with me, please go to allforlunch.com. ALLFORLUNCH, All for Lunch. And basically, this is a charity. What these folks do is they go to schools and they help these kids because there's a lot of kids that, they don't have a lot of money. They could be on reduced lunch. They could be on, they have their lunch accounts, because you have to pay for lunch. And these kids have delinquent accounts. And eventually, after, the account's delinquent, the schools are like, look, you haven't paid your account forever. We can't keep feeding you. So they float them a line of credit. Then eventually they just have to cut them off. These kids are going hungry, and it's ridiculous. So basically what All for Lunch does is they go to these schools, and they basically pay down these delinquent accounts. They connect donors with delinquent accounts to add funds so that every child can have lunch. And I think it's a fantastic thing. Now, I grew up poor as hell. I mean, we were poor. My mother passed away early. Dad had 5 sons. We did not have a lot of money. I was on reduced lunch. There were years that we were on free lunch. I mean, we were broke. And I remember even on reduced lunch, we didn't, Dad didn't have it. So if you get a chance, go to allforlunch.com. Help out these kids. This is not, this was a Georgia guy came up with this or, reached out to me and said, hey, I'm working as a part of this. So if you would, go to All for Lunch and help out these kids. It's not going to some big organization who's going to take 30% and put it in their pockets. It's administrative cost. These are good people helping out kids. Your donations go straight to the kids. So allforlunch.com, I greatly appreciate it. Speaking of lunch, I did go out to Academia last Wednesday. I mentioned on the show Tuesday I was going to have my late birthday dinner. Went out there. They hooked us up with some of the beer, their Hunker Down Brown, their Hopperdesiac, the IQ IPA, which I'm having here. No, I'm having the Skull. You're having the IQ. When you get a chance, go out there and have that Scotch egg. You know what Scotch egg is?
No.
Soft-boiled egg covered in sausage, fried. It's phenomenal. They also have a buffalo chicken mac and cheese.
No, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, that stuff was good. I'm not even a big mac and cheese guy, but I was wolfing that down. It was great. I had the prime rib. My son had the pork chop. That was phenomenal. Wife had a salad because she's a dainty little eater. But if you get a chance, swing out there. They have great beer. That Hunker Down Brown will be your next best favorite beer. Trust me. Get a chance, swing out to Academia. They'll take care of you. And, if you want a great lunch, great dinner, swing by them. But if you want to make sure kids have a good lunch, go by allforlunch.com and take care of those kids. We would greatly appreciate it. If you enjoy watching the show comes to you free of charge. We're not charging anything for it. I guess you have to pay for internet access, but if you really want to support, we tell you to support UGA Sports all the time, but we'd much rather you support All for Kids when you get a chance. I want to go back to some of the guys that are going early in the draft. Give me the grade for Isaac Nada. How did he do? Because I got in trouble for mentioning this Eli Wolf kid coming in, technically graded out higher than him. Apparently I didn't point out that there's only 350 snaps.
Right.
And some of the Nada folks got upset with that. I'm like, look, I've said nothing but great things about Isaac Nada for 5 years, starting when he was a sophomore in high school. I've said I love the kid. I think he's a great player. I was just pointing out that you're losing a great blocker in Isaac Nada, and you're bringing in this Wolf kid who's grading out pretty well. We knew his older brother who was fantastic. Mm-hmm. So we don't know as much about Wolf, but this kid graded out well according to your thing. But
when you have experience, I mean, him transferring gives you experience. You give somebody who has sort of put in the work, put in the time.
Yeah, 350 snaps in the SEC, let him play. But I want to kind of go over the grades just to give a perspective, because we mentioned grades, but we haven't named how anybody's done. So give me Isaac Nada, Miko Hardman, guys like that, so we can get an idea of what is the grade for a guy who should be leaving early to the NFL.
Well,
or
it's a great question.
What do they have, I should say?
Is there two different grades, though? Yeah. The grade that they're playing, how they played, and then how they did. Projected?
There's a projection. You think about the NFL draft and what we grade. We're grading, again, performance, specifically what's happening, as opposed to it's not a talent evaluation. It's not, hey, how big, how fast, how strong is this guy? But you can see those things with Nada. Nada's grade was 78 this past year, which was his highest career grade. And he's traditionally a very good run blocking grade.
Okay, what does 78 mean?
Okay,
because to me, a 78 is a high C.
Right. You think about it.
That's mediocre, But that's
an above average. That's a very above average to borderline very good starter. And when you look at like our grades, and if for those who have access to the site and subscribe, it's usually like yellow, orangish, green, and then blue. And the green is where you're getting into the green area. You're getting into those grades where you're getting above average starters, people who are playing above replacement level and borderline good. And then you get in the blues and you get in elite type plays. But the biggest thing with Nada is that when he was targeted, he was very efficient. His 30 of 35 targets. He had the second highest passer rating when targeted among tight ends in the country. Number one was Irv Smith from Alabama. He only had one drop. So, and I think he's one of those guys who come pro day, come combine day, if he runs really, really well, which I think he will run really, really well, I think you see him second round, middle of the second round type deal.
I think that's
He'd
very
be
fair.
a workout warrior.
Yes.
I mean, if I'm going to work a guy out, I mean, you can't do that in college, but you can when you have him in camp and stuff. His skill level, his hand placement, his knowledge of football, watching them practice, watching them coach the other guys. Just for instance, last summer when they was out there with Luke Ford and those guys, he was like a coach on the field. The coaches couldn't be out there. And, I was over there getting some treatment, just watching him one day. He's very football knowledgeable-wise, very astute. So I think he's going to jump out at those pro guys because those hybrid guys are big up there because of what you're talking about, the mismatches. If they don't go to nickel and dime stuff and you can split this guy and put him on a linebacker, he's going to wear him out.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a guy, remember, I've mentioned this numerous times. In high school, he could have been a defensive end. He'd have been all SEC. I mean, the guy's
I 100% agree with that.
Phenomenal off the ball. So his speed.
I went and watched him play at Buford.
Yeah,
when he was at Buford, played at North Oconee.
Exactly.
He was the best player on the field from a defensive standpoint.
So let's move on to Elijah Holyfield. How did he grade out? Because to me, his grades were very
insanely well.
Interesting.
And his grades got better as the year went on. I think he ended up 9th in overall grade. He was 10th in the country, and one of the big things that we'd measure is yards after contact per attempt. He was 10th in the country of yards after contact per attempt. Another thing we have is elusive rating. He was a top 25 player in elusive rating. It's a number that we put together.
Wait a minute. Elijah Holyfield, elusive.
Because
he ran people over. Does that count as eluding them?
Because what that rating measures and what that goes into that is running back performance independent of offensive line play.
Oh.
Because when you look at running back performance, and that's a massive discussion right now in the NFL, is like, for example, what happened with Todd Gurley when he goes down and Anderson comes in and is just as productive, of how important offensive line play is to running back production from a yardage standpoint.
But to add to that, wasn't that one of the reasons why Todd Gurley was jumped up to 10th in the draft, because of how many runs he made behind the line of scrimmage when he was at Georgia, and they realized, hey, if we can just get him to the line of scrimmage, he's going to be something. So that's something you look at too. That's about all I can throw in.
That's always been a pet peeve of mine when you have a great back behind a bad line, and they go, well, he's not a good back. I'm like, you don't understand. No. He's getting hit 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage. He gained 1 yard.
Right.
To me, that's a 3-yard win.
Yes, and it got, for Georgia specifically this year, it trended more towards the backs carrying it later in the season.
Right.
But midway through the season, they weren't even at 50% of their yards after contact. They were getting greater than 50% of yards before even being touched. So that was just sort of
schedule
showing.
Helped us too. There.
Yes, it did, very much so, and that goes into that as well. But I think Elijah is going to be one of those kids who, depending upon the run on running backs, he's going to be up there, and he's going to show, especially if he shows that he can catch the ball in the backfield.
And he's probably going to do about 50 reps.
Special teams too, right?
Yes. Great special teams player.
We mentioned Miko Hardman earlier. Just give me an idea of what he did well in his grades.
I mean, the biggest thing is his grade was sort of middle of the road, and a lot of that, he was second on the team in drops. And contested catches for him was an issue, and it's something he's going to have to show at the next level. Like, for example, in the SEC championship game, right there, literally right in front of me, I was down there watching, and those are contested catches that you got to make. But his speed is game-changing speed. It's track speed. It's unreal speed, and you can't coach that.
No, that football speed.
Compare him coming out to McKenzie.
From a grading perspective, I think they're pretty well on par from how they graded on our perspective. But, I think he's a little bit bigger. Yes. He's obviously a little bit bigger. He's not much bigger than me. I saw him at one of our –
faster, too, probably.
a little bit faster than me, just a little bit.
Not really. He's pretty quick.
But, he came to one of our youth football games.
What about Terry Godwin? How do you rate him?
See, Terry, I think he's one of those guys who, when he might be a 5th, 6th round guy, but who ends up sticking on a roster for 6, 7, 8 years because of his ability to run routes.
The guy can make a play when the band's playing, though.
Yes.
I mean, there's just so many people up there that need guys to be possession receivers. And he can play in a slot, and he's fast.
Yes.
But the guy that I think is going to knock them naked, that means make them That's a bad statement there. I shouldn't have said. It's going to really do a good job is Ridley.
Yes, sir.
And
we've actually already highlighted that on the site.
Ridley.
His there was a link I posted a couple weeks ago, or about a week back. One of our guys looked at specifically his ability to run routes, and it's very like his brother-esque.
Yeah.
There's a reason, and his ability to break off at the top of the route, like the LSU game. That's just unreal route running, and that translates to the next level.
Well, not only
like
that, he's got speed. He can move. He's got the body size that you want. He has the control. He will knock your helmet off.
Yes.
He hits like a ton of bricks. And I know a lot of people are like, well, his brother's already in it. The guy wants to be just like
that's a big plus, his brother, though. Can you imagine all the
knowledge.
You go over there and watch the Falcons practice?
Well, a lot of people, to your point, a lot of people said, well, he doesn't need to go to the NFL because he's got his brother can help him out. I'm like, no, you don't understand. This guy is driven. He wants to be there. He doesn't want to live off his brother. This guy wants to go make a name for himself. He's going to do that. He forged his own path. When he was going to South Carolina, changes his mind, comes to Georgia, pretty much sight unseen. They're walking around with no coaches showing him what to do. He's like, yeah, I'm going to be successful here. He is successful, and now he's leaving early because this guy is driven. He's got the ability to do it. He has the drive to do it. I think he's going to be a huge NFL player.
And intangibles at the NFL level, the ability to be an adult, basically.
Yeah, and it doesn't hurt that his hands are this big.
Right.
Catches that thing like a tennis ball.
Yeah, and if he runs really well, like if he runs, low 4.4s, that's going to he will be a second round guy.
What about Gaillard?
I think he will be, if not, I think he'll probably be the second or third center off the board. Depends on where. I think Bradbury from North Carolina State is going to be somebody that goes relatively early, or is one of the top centers off the board.
So what round would you say? Third round?
I think that's sort of a good.
So essentially, we could have 6 offensive players from last year's team when you add Godwin in there and Gaillard. We could have 6 guys.
Top 5 rounds.
Top 5 rounds.
Very much so.
Yeah, and see, I like what you pointed about Terry Godwin, because to me, the brighter the lights are, the bigger his play. This is a guy who wins you an NFC Championship game. He is that.
The guy can step up the ladder. He can go up the ladder. Notre Dame.
Yes.
You just go back to Notre Dame for him, Alabama for Ridley last year, 2 years ago.
Yep.
You're playing against one of the best secondaries in the country, and you're eating their lunch. Mm-hmm. Now, this year their secondary wasn't quite as good, but I'm not a guy to go overboard about players, but I just think as much as I would like to all of those guys come back, I think they all got really good futures, and that's the way it's going to be. And I'm going to ask you about the trend, the youthful players. We've talked about on our show about the early enrollees, about guys going out early, and about the early signing date, letting these kids come in and start school. And the transfer portal, you're just going to see younger teams, aren't you?
Very much so. Very much. And guess who's going to have the youngest teams? The best teams. Because the 5-star kids, the supremely talented kids, those are the kids who leave. It's been shown year over year. Who has the most early entrance into the NFL draft? It's the SEC, especially it's the top tier of the SEC. And one of the sort of cause and effect, one of the effects of that is you're going to have young teams. Freshmen are going to have to step in and play. And, going back just to the talent level on this past year's team and moving forward, they talk about a lot about the 2011 Alabama LSU game, the 9-3 game or 9-6, whatever it was, that had, I think, 40-something or 50 players that ended up getting drafted. I think this past year's SEC championship game will have more.
I agree.
That actually played in the game, that stepped foot on the field, and that's special teams included, because true freshmen with supreme talent. I think you're going to have a 2-deep offensive line that every single one of them will possibly be drafted this year.
And defensively, our defense is going to be better down the middle, don't you think, with our linebackers? And
I think you're going to get better. Talent-wise, just from the eye test part.
All right, we're going to do a quick
this guy here likes to throw water on the.
No, I'm just we got a lot of questions. But we don't have a lot of time.
Hey, we can't do it all there, man.
I know. We don't have Brent here each week, so eventually Jake's going to come back. He's in Bangkok. Or
maybe
like
I can answer some off the air.
we can do that. But
I can do those things all the time.
Yeah, well, I know you can answer these on the UGASports.com because you have a membership there.
Yes.
So I'm going to have you go in and answer the questions about Jake Fromm, Brenton Cox, and Adam Anderson. But this is one I do want you to answer on air. How is Devod Wilson in the Sugar Bowl?
By the way, just from watching, that guy's a player. Just from
that's what Coach has been saying for over a year.
You watch just now his grade in that game wasn't as maybe what you would think.
First game he's ever played.
Exactly, and he was targeted often.
Absolutely.
But from a physicality standpoint, from what Kirby wants out of that position, where you want a Minkah Fitzpatrick type who's physical and tall enough and physical enough to play against the run, but also has the hips to play in the slot, which is what that position has to do. That dude, he's a dude, basically.
Hey, and seriously, he's going to have a year and a half, although some of it was injured. He's going to have been here for a year and a half before he plays in his first home game.
Yeah.
All those practices, all that stuff. I mean, you look at Devon, you look at Stevenson, you look at Reese. Our secondary talent level stronger than bridge cable.
And in terms of, from a talent perspective, your point earlier, the NFL part of that, it might be to the point where you're seeing 6, 7, 8, 9 guys that are leaving, after each year because of the talent is that much.
But I think a
just
lot
like defensive end. How about those defensive ends we got? Cox and
there are going to be some. I do think there are going to be some very disappointed juniors because when you have that many kids going out, that's not. You got to have the subsequent number of players leaving. Not renewed next year. You only have a 53-man roster, so it's going to be some guys that will be disappointed.
Andrew Thomas is a top 10 guy, isn't he?
I think he will be. Yes, he's very much on that radar.
Speaking of top 10, I want to go with the number one place to go when you need your overhead door fix. It's Aaron Overhead Doors. They're a big sponsor of our show, big sponsor of our website. If you were grading them out, they'd get hundreds across the board. And they do get graded because if you go to their website, AaronOverheadDoors.com, and you look at their ratings, they have the Google ratings, they have the Better Business Bureau ratings, they have what are those websites, like Home Builder and all the things where you can actually rate them. They get 5 stars and everything. They have hundreds and hundreds of 5-star ratings. There's a reason for that. And again, Ryan Lucia, the guy that put the thing, who has the one here in North Georgia, he said, "Look, I am a customer service guy. I just happen to do garage doors." So his job is to make sure you're happy. It's not to slap up a garage door and mark you off as being done. His job is to make sure that he and his people leave you with a fantastic customer experience. And to that end, if you call Aaron Overhead Doors, you're going to get one. It's not rocket science. If you could get that same customer service in everything you did, life would be a lot easier. You need a plumber to come out, and you had that kind of personal guarantee from the guy that runs it, you'd be excited. A contractor, a guy that washes your car. It doesn't matter.
Anything.
A guy that cuts the grass, somebody who watches your kids. If you could get that kind of customer service in any other field, you would jump on it in a heartbeat. So if you do need something with your overhead door, call Aaron Overhead Doors, or they'll come out and they'll give you a free estimate. You don't have to pay for them to come out like you do some people. $75 for us to come out. No, they'll come out and do it, for free. And they also have financing. So if you're like, wow, instead of just getting the machine fixed, I'm going to get a whole new door. It's going to be more than I want to spend right now. I'll finance it. 0% financing out at Aaron Overhead Doors. So give them a shout out. And of course, as we wrap up the show, I want to give a big shout out to 365 Game Day and our friends over at Cable East. Thanks for sponsoring the show. We don't have enough time, but do you have a last thing you want to get in?
Can I give a shout out, actually?
Sure.
Somebody who's probably sat in this chair before, Mr. Russ Tanner, former Georgia
we don't like Russ.
center. Russ is a new dad today.
Saw that picture.
Is he?
I saw a picture said he's going to call the kid Major for right now or something like that, right?
Yes.
Russ is
big congrats to Russ.
One of the greatest Georgia Bulldogs of all time. Yes.
And is a new dad today.
And your head coach that you coach with, Russ and David Pollock, were two of the last guys I was involved with recruiting here. So I appreciate you helping those kids and coaching the ball too. That means a lot to them to have
a lot of fun.
Yeah, I want to tell everybody how he and David Pollock cheat. So he and David Pollock, what is it, 12 and under?
We do two. We have 2 teams actually, 12 and under, 10 and under.
So out at Oconee
North Oconee, the Titans.
North Oconee, the Titans. They got kids out there running pro sets, calling audibles. We've got 10-year-olds calling audibles.
But seriously, they build them.
We're going to teach them football, right?
North Oconee's a team of the future out there with that kind of they got a lot of kids coming up. They're going to be tough.
All right, well,
that's the goal.
So good luck to you. I know
Thank
you guys
Appreciate
win
it.
Championships all the time. Shout out to David Pollock. And big congratulations, as the Arabs say, Mabruk, to Russ Tanner on the birth of his baby. Russ is one of the greatest guys out there. What is the name of his company?
They
that's
finance.
First Lending. First Lending.
Yeah,
Is that
if you get a chance, go out to just find him on Facebook. And again, we want all the Georgia fans watching this to support the Georgia people. So if you get a chance, swing out and give him a congratulations on Facebook. And then if you need your house refinanced, call Russ Tanner.
Yes, sir.
Anyway, that's all the time we have for this week's show. We will be back next week. We might even have Jake back, or he might be in Miami covering the big camp down there. So we'll see if we have Jake back. If not, we'll ask Brent to come back and answer the rest of these questions.
How about old Gilbert knocking it out there at that Houston camp, that kid we talked about from Marietta, he's number one player there.
Reek Gilbert, phenomenal player. We're going to have an update on him very soon. When you get a chance, swing by UGASports.com for all the news and notes on recruiting and the team, and we will talk to you next week.
That's it for this episode of the UGA Sports Live Podcast. Tune in next week for more Georgia Bulldogs news and notes from Athens.